everybody. Welcome back. Live at Drew's house, Joppa afternoon drive from our NCM Hub Newburyport studios. Hope you're all having a good day. We're ready to rock here. We got a big action-packed show for you, so let's get right to it. Today we're talking about something within the Newburyport school system that first caught my attention like a month ago. We had Bruce Menon from the school committee on, and I just remember saying to him, that's a really cool thing. And he said, you should do a whole show on that. Well, today is that day. We're talking about student-led conversations, and you're going to learn all about this, and don't worry, you'll have a full explanation in a moment. Newburyport Superintendent Sean Gallagher in the house. Hello, Sean.
Hey, how are you?
Good. And the principal of the Knock Middle School, Nick Marcos.
Thanks for having me.
First time for you on the show, right?
First time, yeah.
The first timers always wear the tie. You guys both have ties.
That's right. My top button's undone.
Yes.
Third one, there won't be a tie.
Very good. Yeah, eventually it's,
That's right. I'll be wearing a sweater.
Hawaiian
like
shirt or something.
That's right.
See you in the springtime. All right, student-led conversations. Maybe, Sean, we'll start with you.
Sure.
Why don't you explain what the basis of this is?
Yeah, so part of our strategic plan that we worked on within the community in Portrait of a Graduate is to really give our students more student voice within the school system. So for the past few years, we've really developed our student leadership through the middle school and then also the high school, and even at the Bresnahan there's opportunities for students to take leadership roles. And really we bring our students to the table, regarding different various school issues. Could be the student handbook and looking at rules and getting student input. Mr. Marcos and his team really kind of has taken that student voice to a whole new level. And really has developed with his teachers that you'll meet in a moment, the student-led conversations around, every year. If you recall, we had the parent-teacher days and parent-teacher nights. And
I remember those.
That's right. You'd have to prepare your parents on, the grades that you're probably getting and, So
a lot of my conversations were like, well, here, there was a reason for...
Exactly.
Yeah.
A and Jim didn't, do as well as you got older. But so it's really just more of the students taking ownership of their own learning, really looking at a way, and Mr. Marcos can explain this a lot better, but really working with the teacher and the parent as allies and supports. Last year, Mr. Marcos and his team, they piloted a smaller program. It was very successful, and then they really have expanded it to grade 6, 7, and 8. And the feedback that we received from parents and guardians has been extremely positive, along with the students. So that's kind of what led us to be here today and what Mr. Menon was talking about, and I can turn it over to Mr. Marcos.
And Nick, so I think I used the term off the air here, of it's kind of like the new look parent-teacher conference.
Yeah.
Bringing the kid involved.
100%. So just to highlight, I guess the typical parent conferences can still happen.
Yeah.
And they do happen pretty much every day, where a parent will email us or email a teacher, schedule an additional meeting with a teacher or a whole team. And those conversations happen. Why does my kid have a C in your class? They can have those conversations, like I said, over the phone, through email, or live still. But this idea actually started about 3 years ago during COVID, on the onset of it, where we went to essentially thinking we're going to be home for 2 weeks, but then it became essentially 3 months.
Yeah.
And it was really just trying to track our students appropriately. So myself, and when I was the assistant principal role, I want to give a shout out to Lisa Furlong, who's still within the district as the director of communications, but was the principal at the time. So we developed just a system of accountability where adults in the building were reaching out to students that weren't getting onto Zoom consistently, or weren't accessing the Google Classroom, or passing in assignments through those those first 3 months, which were really challenging.
I thought about that so often during COVID. Like,
Right.
There's no way all these kids are logging on.
Absolutely.
Never mind paying attention. Like that, but
Yeah, I mean, we found that out the hard way about 4 weeks into it.
Yeah.
But then I can't say enough about my team of teachers just on board. So there we developed a system where essentially every adult was responsible for about 8 to 12 kids, and then what that evolved to in the fall was, as we developed kind of this new type of school in this really first full year of COVID, was it started with a worksheet where towards the middle of the trimester, kids would log into their Aspen, which is where we keep our our data, our grades, etc. And they would sit down with their advisor and say, here are my grades right now, and this is what I want them to be, and here's a goal I have for myself. So let's just take an example. Nick Marcos is in the classroom, and I've got all C's right now, and the trimester closes in a month. And then they'll sit down with their trusted adult, that adult that they've built a relationship with for, in different ways, doing activities. And they might say, hey, why do you have a C in science? Well, I missed a quiz and I got 5 assignments missed. Well, what's your goal for the next week? Well, I don't know. And that adult would just essentially do a lot of goal setting. So not only are we having conversations and worried about grades and trying to get the kid caught up, but we're also building those skills of advocacy, long-term planning, and some goal setting. And then, throughout the trimester, the advisor would work with them, and then essentially at the end of the beginning of the next trimester, end of that first trimester, we'd go back into ask and say, hey, look, that C in science became a B plus. Nice job. We celebrate that victory, and then set some more goals for that second trimester. And then as we evolved, and you're going to hear from Eric Shilga and Brenda Palmisano, 2 of my great teacher leaders over there. They piloted it, like Mr. Gallagher said, on 1 8th grade team last year. And we saw a ton of success, over an 85% approval rate from our families, as far as it really transformed the conversation, and then just the impact it had on the students. So, when your parents used to go to student conversations or parent conferences, and they'd come home and say, hey, what the heck are you doing, man? Our conversations were, the kid was in the room. And it gave them a sense of ease because they were direct in the conversation. They didn't have to wait at home and ask all these bunch of questions. So we had a lot of kids who were like, I used to get anxious when my parents came home because I didn't know what was going to be said. So that was a really powerful piece.
Very bad deja vu. Yep.
Absolutely, yeah, myself included. But overall, it's really been successful. And this past year, we had this first trimester, a 78% approval rate by our family. So I always use the pun. If every politician had a 78% approval rate, we're going to be in a good place.
So walk me through that room with the conferences. Is it who starts the conversation? Did the teacher say, "Sit down here, Johnny's had a rough week," or is it how's it go?
No, so it took. It took months to evolve. And Eric can really speak to the process a little bit more. But essentially, we have a very scripted process for the students that may need it. So developmentally, a 6th grader's conversation is going to be a little bit different than an 8th grader because we're doing a lot more dialogue work in those 7th and 8th grade classrooms. So for the students that really need some support, we have a script. For those students that just feel a little bit more confidence in having those conversations with some adults in the room, it kind of flows a little bit more freely. But it happens, in our advisory, which happens 2 days a week, starting in October. Those conversations and preparation started happening. And we noticed the students that really prepped really well and had some artifacts. They had actually pieces of work in their portfolio that they brought to the table and say, hey, this is where I was in September and October, and this is where I am, in December. And again, just an opportunity to celebrate that growth and have conversations around 1 or 2 pieces. And the great thing about all this is the culmination of all this is June 1st, we're going to have a showcase, school-wide showcase, because oftentimes, kind of in like the typical traditional way in most schools, it's you meet your parents in the fall, maybe in the winter, and then, all right, we'll see you next year. So this June 1st showcase is going to be the culmination of our student-led conversations, and more so just all the great work that our students have done, all of our teachers have led throughout the year. We're doing some stuff on Book Creator, so kids will be able to really create a really robust portfolio. And then looking at kind of the portrait of a graduate going all the way through the high school, the goal is for these kids to leave here with a plan. Whether it's college or career ready, and we're just gonna be a part of that process.
Yeah, so Sean, you could probably add to that a little bit. I'm sure this is you're watching the success rate of this, and hopefully it all works out great. And you hope it can go right through the high school. That's the grand plan. Is all this act as one big Newburyport system, right?
Exactly, and going back to our strategic plan and portrait of a graduate. These are some of the elements.
Is that a Newburyport term, or is that I never heard that back in the day? Is that something you guys came up with?
Yeah, we really wanted to focus on the portrait of the graduate of working within the community, the parents, the students, and the faculty of what are the traits that our students are going to need in today's day and age once they leave Newburyport High School to be successful, either in college or career. And it was throughout our school community, it was a preschool all the way to grade 12 collection of really developing those soft skills that students are going to be able to, to utilize to be successful. So this student-led conversations is all about some of those skills: self-advocacy, goal setting, And when they're, like all of us in the real world, if we are struggling, who can help us achieve our goals, or who can help us achieve social emotional learning if we're struggling. So at a 6th grade level, it's pretty amazing to have students with a teacher and a parent in the room self-advocating of, hey, here are all the things that I did well that I'm proud of with showing the work, but here are some of the areas I need help, and mom or dad or the teacher, this is how you can help me as the student. So
I was going to say teachers must learn a lot too, right?
Correct.
I mean, it's because teachers are probably hearing some of this, and maybe okay, I'm not being effective in that way. It's probably a good question to ask your teachers too.
Right.
But
Yeah.
I guarantee you they're learning things and maybe taking some new approaches. 'Cause teachers are always developing too.
And it's very individualized. So let's say you do have some students that are struggling, like with homework at night. Well, they could say, I need less homework because they may be watching a sibling, or they may be going to bed late, or whatever.
Real life stuff, yeah.
Real life stuff. So now the teachers have that input of individual student, and then they can start gearing the learning individually. So
Wow.
it's really impressive, and I can't thank Mr. Marcos enough. And then the teachers, there's been a lot of professional development going into that too, because as a teacher, some of the students might say, your teaching isn't helping me.
Yeah.
And they got to be open to listen to student input too. So it's not just, we're just going to do this. So there's been a lot of preparation for the past couple of years, but we are seeing some great benefits of it.
I'm thinking back to my high school days. We had one teacher who we all really liked, and it got in the way because she was the whole class was being ineffective. But but it just wasn't. Her style was moving too quickly. It's unbelievable the flashbacks you have when you talk about these things. I can remember right where I was sitting in the room. But she was just moving too quickly for everyone, and just not really. Just young teacher, I think that was the deal. But we all liked her, so nobody said anything.
Right.
And then everybody fails the test.
Right.
And that's not good for anybody.
Right.
She feels bad.
And that's why, if you even reflect back on that, how important would that information have been for her?
If we could have said,
individual students saying, "Hey, you're moving a little too fast," and then she can modify, her lessons to accommodate the kids in front of her. So
algebra.
There you go. Oh, I don't think going fast this slow would have helped me. So.
All right, well, Sean, I know you you got another meeting to go to,
do,
right? You want to do a tag team? We'll get some of your teachers in here, and we'll do this. It's good
100%.
to see you. Thanks.
All
for
right,
doing
nice
this.
to see you too.
Man.
All right, you have a great day.
All right, so we've been talking with the principal of the Knock Middle School here in Newburyport, Nick Marcos, and thank you to Newburyport Superintendent Sean Gallagher, who stopped in. He's now out because he's a very busy man. And we bring in a couple teachers here, 8th grade teacher and dialogue coach, Eric Shilga in the middle now. Eric, how are you?
Great.
First time on the show. Thanks for coming up. And the school interventionist, Brenda Palmisano. How'd I do? Good with names? Good.
Excellent, thank you.
Very nice. School interventionist. I don't think we had one of those when I was in school.
You probably did not.
All right, so very, very cool. So we've been talking about the student-led conversations thing, and you guys are a part of this, and I think it's a fascinating thing, bringing the kids in. What's been, just broad question, the immediate impact that jumps off the page for you with this whole bringing the kids in? Who wants it?
Well, I've been doing this for a couple years now at different schools where I've worked. So I actually started working in the Marshall Islands when I was just beginning my teaching career. So out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, halfway between Hawaii
did not know that.
and Australia. Yep, small Catholic school there. And so I worked with this great principal who had seen an article about student-led conferences. And she said, why don't we give this a try? And we had a very rudimentary approach. We've really tried to fine-tune it and work a lot on some of those goal-based conversations that Nick was talking about earlier. But that first go-around in the Marshall Islands was when I first experienced the power of a student-led conference, or in our case, conversation.
Yeah.
And I've come to believe that it's one of the few things that you can do that really has this broad transformative impact, not just in the students and their experience of what school is like for them, but also in terms of the way the teachers think about their relationship with students, what kinds of conversations they want to be having, and the way parents think about their kids as learners, and kind of see them coming into their own with some agency, some power, some control over what's happening to them.
Is there a level of, like, you kind of take away the fake? It's like, I imagine there's a lot of truth that gets thrown around in those things. Like, I can't get the homework done because and then you hear maybe a 12-year-old kind of vent a little bit, and you get to the truth of the matter. That's really an issue. Is there some of that?
Yeah, I think integrity is a big part of it.
That's
for
probably
sure.
a better word, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times someone might come into that conversation as a parent thinking, oh, I want you to tell me what's really going on.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the only person that really knows what's going on for that kid inside is them. They know what they feel. They know what they've experienced. And so you may get from a teacher what you and they think is the truth. But I think when you get to hear the kids say it and own it, it just takes on a power of its own.
Yeah. Brenda, what have you noticed through your experience?
Just to kind of add to what Eric was just saying in your question, I think having students identify what the obstacles are for some of their struggles in learning is really a big part of what I try to do in my role. So I love that we're taking that to a level where they can say that in front of their parents and really have the parents hear what some of those obstacles are.
Yeah, I mean, I bet sometimes the obstacles can be at home. Sometimes the obstacles,
Absolutely.
I imagine sometimes the obstacles are with the teacher too. Maybe teachers learn stuff along the way. Is that accurate?
Oh, for sure. I think, and I think that we're trying to get the students to feel a little bit more comfortable about identifying that and finding ways to communicate that to their teacher with the help of their advisor or another trusted adult in the building that they can help have those conversations.
Yeah, that can be. I can imagine that can be tough at 12, telling
Absolutely.
telling the teacher you're going to see every day that you're not getting through to me.
Yeah.
But it's that's the good truth part of it, right? I guess. Yeah. So would you say it's been? Has it been like eye-opening, or are you surprised how it's been working? Are you surprised that you've been affected by it?
I think it's been, Nick and I started this work before Eric came along, kind of on a very, level, very entry level, where we were trying to get kids to identify some goals and talk about their learning. And then when Eric brought his experience in, it was just a perfect match to try to get these student-led conversations going and really take it to another level. So I think we've been really encouraged by the students and their involvement and their engagement and their ability to identify some of their strengths and weaknesses and where they want to go with things. We still have work to do, but we'll definitely get there.
Eric, middle schoolers can be a tough age, if I remember correctly. Right? But what has been I mean, is it a tough sell? You guys are going to come in with the parents for this. Is it a tough sell, or do they relish the opportunity to do it?
I think the initial reaction is pretty universally resistance and fear, disgust, adamant no. Is this required? Can I get out of this? And how?
Homework pass.
Yeah, exactly. And so what we tell them is that's a totally natural reaction to doing a new thing.
Yeah.
And that's what learning is about, is trying new things and getting better at the things that, make us nervous and are hard. But what we tell them is that we have a structure, a container for this conversation that we've created, and we're going to work together to make sure that that container can hold everything that gets said in this conversation. Yeah. And just trust us that right now this is scary, but when the time comes for you to have this conversation with me and your parents, you're going to be ready.
Yeah.
And I think that, when we look at the feedback from students after the fact, the vast majority of them say, yes, I was ready to have this conversation.
It's almost like, and maybe you would cringe at me even saying this, it's almost like therapy. Let's go work out what my issues are currently and the people that I see most often in my life, my parents, my teachers, It's like,
I don't cringe at that at all. Okay. I feel like, the biggest relationships that kids are having at this point, aside from the ones they have with their friends, they could have a separate conference with their friends and it would be very interesting. But it's with their parents, right?
Yeah.
And to move that conversation that might be happening in the car, in the rush to school in the morning, or maybe pulling teeth at the dinner table trying to get them to tell you about what they're doing amidst the homework and the chaos of extracurriculars and everything else, moving that conversation into a table in a classroom and setting aside 20 minutes just for that relationship to be kind of established and grow, it's really cool to watch that happen. And it is, I think, a little bit like the kind of self-discovery that might happen to a person in therapy.
Yeah. Brenda, I was telling these guys earlier that, it's almost like I'm having like deja vu when I'm talking about it, because, you remember some of those moments where, I was always very private with my schoolwork. My parents kind of trusted me, do your thing. If you screw up, you're going to hear it from us, but everybody remembers maybe that class they're struggling with, and I'll work my way out of it. I'll work my way out of it. Don't bring it up at the dinner table. Don't answer many questions. And then I didn't quite work my way out of it. That's not going to be a great conference. And it's like anxiety, like they got to go meet with Mrs. or Mr. That's not going to be a great night for me. And that's like anxiety all day. And, I would have loved to have been there for those to say, I really did work, or, tennis practice was just, crazy those 2 weeks, or it would have been, I would have relished the opportunity to be there, I think. Maybe at least adult Drew says that. Maybe not as a kid.
No, I think you're right. I think when kids know that their teachers and parents are communicating and they're all part of the team that's supporting them and advocating for them, it's a pretty strong, support for them, and I think they do well with that.
Yeah. Yes, and especially when things are going well.
Even when things are not going well. I think
Yes.
that's actually when it's even more important, because rather than just kind of feeling the anxiety and floundering on your own, you're now like, I've got that advisor that I can go to, and I can try to get help and figure out how to communicate with my teacher or my parent if I have something to tell them. That's all part of it.
And it must be great. Sorry, go ahead.
I think big changes come from small shifts too. So I think a lot of these problems for a kid where it's not going well, maybe the relationship with a teacher or a parent isn't clicking, or they're not getting their assignments turned in, or that project is weighing you down with all the extracurriculars you have on your plate. I think that a lot of times it feels really daunting to a student because the problem feels huge.
Yeah.
But then you sit down and you have a conversation and you realize that you're going to solve that problem with just a series of small steps along the way.
Yep.
And this conversation can be the thing that kind of unlocks the first of those small steps, and then that little shift sometimes leads to a really big change.
Yeah, it's more like therapy than it's an okay word.
And then those shifts don't happen unless that kid's in the room, right?
Yeah.
Because Eric used to say it best, and it was really enlightening as far as what good is it if the parents and the teacher know what's going on and the student doesn't?
Yeah.
Right, so having the student in that room is so powerful for them. When we talk about 21st century skills of building adversity and building resilience for kids, and this is an opportunity, I'm going to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
This might be uncomfortable. This public speaking right now might be uncomfortable for many of us doing this as adults. Let's start prepping them as young kids, as 12, 13, 14-year-old teenagers, to build those soft skills, as they look for the future.
And I mean, teachers, like you said, teachers in the end, you're rooting for every student. So even when you have those difficult conversations, maybe a kid is struggling and it's not the best grades on paper, it's like, I imagine most of the time the message when that kid leaves is, we're going to turn this around, or that, it's probably an uplifting note I'm guessing they're going out on, where everybody doesn't go home and doesn't sleep all night, right?
Yeah. Well, think about like the two polar opposites, right? You have a kid who really does well in school, who loves school, or just does really well, and you have a kid who's just like, school's not my thing. There's good that's coming out of that conversation, rather than, hey, your kid's an all-star, go home now and pat him on the back. We had great conversation with those really high-performing students on ways that they can grow, and then we celebrated even the students that aren't doing so well in a specific subject, just celebrated their strengths and how we can get them to grow in certain areas. So I think overall, I can't commend like these two people here that sit next to me, their work. They make it a lot easier on me as a principal. I really don't have to do anything. I just kind of show up and they do everything. They literally just took this and ran with it. And just, the 80 staff members that we have in the NOC, we had some really tough conversations, even, as a team, as a family. But they dove right in because they knew it was all about students first. And that's what we really stand for at the NOC.
Yeah. What is the toughest obstacle you have found, Brenda, with this program? Is it just that initial getting the kids on board, or?
I think the toughest part was to try to, as Eric already described, some of the students were a little bit resistant, right?
Yeah.
And I think some of the teachers were too, because I think it was a shift in their thinking and a little bit of a different mindset.
Just straight up, I don't really want the kid there.
Well, more about just how do we do this? How do we get, what we're finding is the most challenging is this age group of kids, they're not really good at setting goals for themselves. And that's not their fault. It's just a developmentally kind of where they're at. So a lot of my work has been to try to work with some of the grade 6 teachers who have the youngest students in the building, trying to get them to understand where they are developmentally and what they're able to do and what kind of support they need in terms of creating goals for themselves, and really understanding, what kind of goal do you want to have? Get an A in math, or do you want to, put strategies and other things in place to help you get that A?
Some people struggle well later into life in setting goals, right? It's a hard thing to do.
It's a hard thing for anybody.
Same question to you. Just the biggest obstacle.
I think it's interesting when we had the students sit down after the student-led conferences and submit some goals that had come up for them out of the conferences. We looked at that, and as we went through the list, we saw a lot of get all A's, get all A's, get all A's. It was just really sort of grade-oriented achievement mentality. And so when we looked at that, we said, I think we really need to keep pushing here and talk about a conversation about learning that's about more than grades. And so I think where we're trying to move now with this showcase is, yes, grades matter. We want that information to represent that you're learning and growing in our school. And we want you to be able to talk about the things that you're really interested in. So I have one student whose goal is to try something new and discover a new interest. that's a very high achieving student. You know, she's getting great grades. She doesn't need to worry about that. She's doing everything she needs to do to succeed academically, but she feels like she's kind of in a learning rut. And she realized, you know, just getting an A is trying to get that A is leading me to make a lot of safe choices. I want to start taking some risks so I can discover that there's something I'm interested in that I didn't even know about before I tried it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's next level. That's okay. Very interesting. One thing I pretty much ask every teacher who comes through here, and a lot of this, I think it kind of relates to each other. All this talk about making sure they're ready for the next level, and then high schoolers ready for the college and the real world, and you know the portfolio. Brenda, we'll start with you on this one. I just wonder, I can't tell you, you know, I'm 36. I still go out to dinner with people, and like you'll find I struggles to leave a tip, like a very basic like life thing, or like people that you know talk about the stock. I wish they taught us more about the stock market in like high school. Like I wish I had a very better understanding of that before I kind of entered. And you think back to that, and the long question here, the short of it is, I wonder, like, do you think kids get enough of that real world teaching in 2023? Because I know a complaint from a lot of my generation was like some of that stuff I don't remember, didn't take with me. I wish I learned some of that other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, my first teaching job was over 30 years ago, and I can tell you we're doing a lot better job at that now than we were back then. Newburyport in particular, I've been with this district for a while, and I'm super impressed with some of the stuff they're doing, both at the middle school level, elementary, high school. They've got a nice investment club at the high school. I don't know if you know about that, but that's a super popular program. Some, you know, real life, real world stuff going on over there. So I do think we do. And I think this is all part of it too, is that whole thinking about your learning, that metacognitive piece is huge. And like, what am I good at? Where am I going? What skills do I need? We're doing a good job.
I mean, that student you have that's thinking about no longer getting the grade A anymore, like that student has clearly had a revelation of like, okay, maybe that's not what's important in life. Let's try to expand my horizons a little bit. That's a life lesson, I would think.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the biggest skills that our current times are calling for from students and all of us is the ability to listen and ask questions and seek understanding across lines of difference. And so I think with a conversation like this, and that's why we were really intent on calling it a student-led conversation. It's the idea of sitting down with people who are different from you, you know, even if you come from the same family or the same school system, and trying to build those bridges of understanding across that difference. And I know that's not like balancing a checkbook or leaving a tip at dinner, but if you can ask really good questions.
Balancing a checkbook, good one.
Right, who does that anymore? But if you can ask really good questions and you can listen, I mean, imagine how many doors would open to you in your professional and personal life.
Yeah.
Well, not you. You get great questions.
Would you think a great question at a restaurant? But hey, what should I tip you?
Right.
Yeah, you could be taking advantage of that one. But how do you handle that question though about the real world applications?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have come a long way, and I still think we have a long way to go. But if we look at really a start of this, if we look at what Mr. Wolf is doing up at the high school, creating pathways, innovation pathways for kids to go. We're working right now on a grant at the high school around creating specific career pathways and exposure. We're doing a career speaker series at the middle school. We just ran that through January in our 8th grade, where we had people from educational fields, software, technology, law enforcement, politics, you name it, they've been in there. We also have a place-based education program that we're trying to really build in a more robust way, getting kids into the field, studying science and social studies. So again, I think we're leading the charge here.
Yeah.
When I speak to other local principals across the North Shore and Cape Ann, and they see some of the work that we're doing at the middle school level and through the high school, they're pretty impressed.
Is it me, or it seems like the life on a middle school student it just seems harder in 2023 than it was in 2003. I was even before that, but it just there's a lot going on in the world. You have a pandemic you just lived through. You have I'm sure they're watching the protests during the pandemic. There's people on the nightly news you see under war, and there's a lot going on in the world, and everybody has one of these, and you can see things. It seems to be more complicated than when I was in middle school. Am I right? Do you get that impression?
It is more complicated, and I think things like this that we're doing are helpful, because it does help the student to think about themselves and what they need to do and where they need to go and what path they want to be on. And we want to continue to support them in that way.
Yeah.
You have to be very intentional and deliberate. I tell the students, there's so many demands on their attention and on my attention now, ways to get in to your life and your eyes and your ears that didn't exist even when I was in middle school, like you were saying.
Yeah.
And to be bombarded by all of those bids for your attention, it requires the student to exercise a really high level of discipline and intentionality. And I think I got away with a lot in middle school because I didn't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Equipping the students with those tools, that's a challenge.
What was it like teaching? What school did you initially put this program in? Or
In the Marshall Islands, Assumption School.
Assumption School in the
Yeah.
Marshall Islands? What's the teaching environment there?
Well, in a lot of ways, I guess it's easier like that because, there isn't, a robust cellular network. There isn't as much, although there is, social media and things like that. There also wasn't electricity in the classroom, and I could walk out onto the sort of balcony of the school and look at like a mile of sandy beach with the waves rolling in and the palm trees. So there were opportunities also to reflect and in some ways a slower pace of life.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest difference there was that there was a sort of collective mentality where, for example, the students could lock me out of the classroom, yikes, on the Marshallese, the version of Thanksgiving, and then write a whole bunch of songs and speeches for me and my wife, and then present us with a puppy.
Oh, wow.
That happened?
That is still our dog to this day.
No way.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But the idea that they could do all that on their own, right, and then come out on stage and sort of deliver that as a group, but then you ask them to sit down and take a test, and they cannot help but look at their partner for help. It's just a mentality that we're all in this together.
Yeah.
So I feel like a lot of my work is trying to just bring like a blend of that in the classroom, the collaboration and the independence, the resilience, and the willingness to like lean on each other.
Very aggressive gift, a puppy. Did they realize what?
We love our dog to this day. She made it all the way back with us.
How about that? Well, what made you leave? Just
My wife's grad school. We came back here after 3 years, and she's still very tied in with her research and work there. So we hope to go back very soon.
All right, very good. I'm glad. Yeah, I had to ask a follow-up on the Marshall Islands. It's such a unique story. I'm going to end with this one. My wife is a teacher. One thing I notice is she works with about the same age group, but kids with autism. But every teacher I know, I think almost every single one of them works longer hours than they come home, they work. I know many of them, far too many, that buy their supplies for their students because they're short. I know maybe not exactly a problem here, but I see it everywhere. First of all, thank you for doing what you do. We love teachers. And I just wonder, are teachers being taken care of enough out there? Loaded, I know.
That's a loaded question. I think, yes and no. I mean, I think I feel very, and I'm sure Eric can say the same, we feel very supported in this district.
Yeah.
One of the best districts I've worked in, for sure. And I do think we're really well taken care of. But there's, not everyone understands what we do.
Right.
What you just described is perfect, and we all do that. Not everybody thinks we do that.
Yeah.
This is a really resilient and collaborative district, and especially the NOC is a very collaborative space and a supportive space. So I've never worked with colleagues that I respect and whose company I enjoy as much as those that I work with here at the NOC. I would say nationally, the answer to your question is a pretty easy no.
Yeah.
We need to do a much better job taking care of teachers and supporting them in their work in this country.
Well, you see when in COVID, right, when the schools started to, parents didn't know what to do. It's like that's what stops the economy, really, right? It's parents can't go to work, and you realize how important it is. I guess I don't know why a pandemic forced you to think about that. But anyway, any final thoughts from you guys? This has been great for me. I learned a lot about this whole program. Student-led conversations. We'll make sure we say conversations, and because that's kind of the key there, right? We want it to be a conversation and not a conference, right? That's the deal. Final thoughts?
No, I can't thank my team enough. I mean, the demands on a teacher in 2023, you can't imagine what's on them. Before it was you come in, you teach your subject, and you leave. These guys are going above and beyond, and my job is just continue to lift obstacles, continue to say no less. I learned that very easily in my first year as an administrator. But again, I can't speak too much about these guys. It's incredible what they have led in our building, along with the other 80 faculty and staff. Unbelievable community. just happy and thrilled that we had an opportunity to talk all about it today.
Good job, everybody. All right, Principal Nick Marcos, thank you. We got Eric Shilga there in the middle, the 8th grade English teacher and dialogue coach. Dialogue coach, that's another fun title.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, very good. Well, take that class too. School interventionist Brenda Palmisano. Thank you all so much. This has been a blast, and I hope all of you learned a lot out there about this unique thing and maybe becoming more of the norm. We'll watch that through. Thank you to Sarah Blackstone doing all the heavy lifting here as I have these fun conversations today. Sarah Hayden, the boss, and our small but mighty team here in Newburyport NCM Hub. Thank you all. We'll see you next time. Love at Drew's House. Peace.